Now we start our episode 3.
Generative AI is coming into every product that we use. To where we are today, it's miles and miles ahead. Am I going to just type something and then someone's going to deliver it? Yes. Look at e-commerce.
Which areas are ripe for artificial intelligence? What is your take on this?
Take over at some point, whether it's investments, whether it's reporting, whether it's risk management. Overreaction, I definitely feel like people need to be aware of what they're doing with the data, and people are doing.
Now we start our episode 3 that talks about strategic context, family offices, and artificial intelligence. So, Mr. Manish, what is the right mindset for artificial intelligence?
So I'd say for artificial intelligence, first of all, let's set the context. AI has been around for about 50 years, surprisingly. I think what everyone is really talking about when they say AI is what has been over the last 3 years since ChatGPT came out, which is generative AI. And that's really what everyone is focusing on. And I think that's the same thing that we're seeing with, family offices is, how do I use generative AI in my family office? And the first thing, the right mindset is don't be afraid of it, because a lot of people are afraid because they hear a lot of things like, oh, it hallucinates or it may take my job. But the truth of the matter is, generative AI is coming into every product that we use, whether we like it or not. If you start using Gmail lately, you'll see it comes up with a response. You don't even have to use your brain. It tells you this is the way to respond. So I think that's the right mindset, is you should learn to embrace it. And then once you start using it, you'll understand where you can benefit more from it, and really use it more often in your day-to-day of running a family office.
I so agree with you, because I believe artificial intelligence does play a really important role in today's generation. So my next question to you is, where is the biggest disconnect between perception and reality?
Well, I think the biggest, the real disconnect between perception and reality is around my job is going to be gone, or I've heard chatbots, they hallucinate, so the answer is wrong. So that is really the biggest disconnect. The truth of the matter is, whatever you're seeing today, as they always say this in the generative AI space, that this is the worst that it's going to be. It's only going to get better from here. And if you actually look at the arc of innovation from 3 years ago when ChatGPT was released to where we are today, it's miles and miles ahead of where it was, and it's only accelerating. So I think people always have this fear factor because it's something new. When you look at the internet when it was launched, probably 25 years ago, 30 years ago, people were afraid, oh my gosh, how are people going to, do business, because, am I going to just type something and then someone's going to deliver it? Yes. Look at e-commerce. Look at Uber as a perfect example. I open the app, I click on it, and, a taxi comes to you. So there's always that hesitation. How will it work? I'm afraid of it. But that's the biggest disconnect, is the fear factor.
My next question is, which areas are ripe for artificial intelligence? What is your take on this?
Well, I think all areas, and that's the reason why everyone is scared, because no matter what you do, artificial intelligence, generative AI is going to, take over at some point, whether it's investments, whether it's reporting, whether it's risk management, whether it's governance. All of these factors are at play. And that's the reason why when I talk to people about AI, a lot of people are hesitant. If I talk to a CIO that's been at, a family office for 20 years, they're a little concerned because, they've seen what is happening. When you take some of these statements and you upload it and you kind of say, give me a summary, it eloquently just gives you a quick summary that, a lot of CIOs are afraid of. And that's across the board, whether it's the operations people, whether it's the risk management team, all of those guys are very worried. And I shouldn't say they should be worried. You should look at it from a perspective of it makes your life easier. If you have to look at a stack of 100 documents, is that really worthwhile? Or, can you imagine taking those same 100 documents, feeding it to an LLM, and then they are actually giving you an answer whether to go ahead or not go ahead? And I think that's really where the innovation is happening, and where all of these functions are ripe, not for, job destruction, but I think more wealth creation, because more things can happen. You can look at more opportunities in the future.
So according to you, Mr. Manish, how would you define risks and data privacy?
Well, that I would say is the biggest challenge that everyone's facing. And I think, when you look at it from a retail segment, people are okay with, uploading the information. But I think family offices, because they've got, a formal structure set up, they're worried about data privacy. They're looking at all these different, privacy controls, which is very, very, true that they need to take a look at. But I have seen some people take statements uploaded to ChatGPT, and they're okay with it, even though ChatGPT says they're not going to use this data for training, but you never really know what's happening. So I do feel that it's not an overreaction. I definitely feel like people need to be aware of what they're doing with the data, and people are doing it. But what ends up happening is you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons. Does it make sense to take all this data and give it to one of these large language models and get a response? And I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, but you definitely need to be aware that, when you're giving this data to someone, it's outside of your sphere of, control. But, we do that all the time. You look at banking, banking portals, you look at, when you're investing with a financial services company, they've got a web platform, so your data is there as well. So it is there everywhere, but you have to decide, are you consciously going to give it to, an AI chatbot and give them a response?
So my last question to you would be, in the next couple of years, how would you distinguish future-ready family offices? What's your take?
Well, my take is, since we are talking about AI, the only way you can really be future ready is to embrace it. So to say that we're not going to use AI, we're not going to look at it, we're not going to talk about it is definitely, like sticking your head in the sand and thinking that it's going to blow over. And the truth is that is not happening. It's like I said many years ago, if you looked at the internet and say, oh, this is a temporary fad, it's going to go away. And everyone can see how how the internet has completely changed the way we do everything. And I think the same thing is definitely happening in the AI space. And the only way to really, embrace it is to, like I said, to embrace it and take it forward in whatever you do in the family office. And there are so many areas, like I said, it's whether it's risk management, whether it's investing. The whole idea of AI is it allows you to crunch more information, which means you can look at more opportunities. And of course, if everyone's doing the same thing, the idea is who's doing it quicker and faster.
All right. So thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. Would you like to share something with our viewers?
No, I'd like to say thank you so much for the time. This has been great discussing, what family offices, kind of run into, because, on my day-to-day basis, I'm probably talking to 2 or 3 family offices every day. And it's amazing. Even though MProfit is just a technology platform, we end up being a counselor to many family offices, which is very surprising to me. And it's not only just on, how do we invest? What should we invest? What's the market look like? But it's also about, what's happening, what's coming in the future? How is technology going to affect us? How should we set up our family office? What should, my kids do when they go to college? In fact, that was a question that someone asked me. Should my daughter get an MBA? So it's amazing that we get to interact with so many, large families and, investment from an investment standpoint, but also from how should they run their day-to-day organizations and just generally kind of be, an advisor to them.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your space with us. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
If you want to dive deep into these topics, I suggest you all to join our 6th and 7th edition of the Great Indian Family Office Summit to be held in Mumbai and Delhi. Thank you very much.